Hi, this is Sarah from Hardcover Hearts, and I'm here today to do the Booktube Top 10 Tag. This was started by Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, and I'm very honored to have been asked to participate in it by Jason. So check out his original post about this. I'll leave it in the show notes. So when I think about my top 10, this gave me a little concern because I don't tend to think of books in this way. I don't stack rank. I tend to look at each individually or in groupings thematically is how my brain processes what I read. In approaching this, I decided that I would choose the books that have meant the most to me and have given me something tangible to think about, to ruminate on. There's been resonance in my life because of these books that would not have been there otherwise. And I am willing to reread every single one of them, save one. And we'll get to that later. But all of these are 5-star reads. They've all meant something to me, made me think differently, made me feel differently. I'm different because of them. So with that preamble, I also wanted to say that I consider myself much more of a fiction reader, and yet there's a significant amount of nonfiction on this list, which surprised me when I put it together. So thank you, Jason, for giving me the opportunity to think differently about my collection of reading history and to frame it up in this way. So let's get started. The first book I want to talk about, we're going to do from 10 to 1, my favorite at the end. So the 10 is Rebecca Solnit's Hope in the Dark. This book has meant so much to me in the past few years under the administration that we're in. It's a look at the long tail of political action in this country and the ripple effects, the ways that an action can impact the future, and how to think about collective action and collective political awakening, and how it's impacted and changed our world, as well as what opportunities we have to move in the future. And she's just an incisive writer. She's very, very smart, but approachable. The books are approachable, and this book has given me so much comfort. This year I returned to it over and over, and the reason I don't have my physical copy here is because I keep lending it out. So she's an optimistic realist. This is a book that inspires me in a time when I'm wanting to retreat and to kind of push everything off and protect my community and my loved ones. This book inspires me to come back out and to regain my footing in the fight, and it's incredibly powerful for that reason. Let me go to my 9th book. My 9th book is the first science fiction that I ever read. I think I read it when I was in late middle school. I came upon it, I think, by chance, and was changed by it fundamentally. And I still don't read a lot of science fiction because I think it ruined me a little bit for science fiction. I do read every once in a while. It's definitely a genre I enjoy, and so I'm looking for recommendations of things that are in this vein. Okay, so without further ado, I present my beautiful, amazing Folio Society edition of Dune by Frank Herbert. And this book, in number 1, this is one of the fancy, because I remember I got a bonus for something at work, and I binged and I ordered this book because it is just a remarkable edition. What reason Dune matters to me so much is because I've never read at that point, or even maybe since, a more badass grouping of women as the Bene Gesserit, that control power and knowledge. We're not sure what side they're on. Are they good? Are they evil? Are they their own faction working for their own protection of power and knowledge? Fantastic. And I'm absolutely in love with with that, and that's what hooked me in. The combination of the politics and the ecology, the Bene Gesserits. I mean, it really fueled so much of my reading journey as I move forward. So I can't recommend it highly enough. I would be joining in the Dune read along that everyone's doing this summer if I didn't already have so many summer read alongs already set up. But it's fantastic book. Next up is a recent book that I read that I think spoke very highly to me of the same types of themes that I've already spoken about. So number 8 is Milkman by Anna Burns. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I'm going to link to an actual review that I did, other than to say the construction, the politics, the characters, the ability to have stunning beauty in a very bleak situations, gave an optimistic feel, and the strength of the main character and how she keeps her own counsel and how she processes what's happening to her it was phenomenal. So I still thinking about this book, still resonating. Milkman by Anna Burns comes in at 8. Number 7 may be surprise. I really don't understand how this book was not better rated, but it is Rachel Kushner's The Flamethrowers. This book is, when I think back on it, it's a feminist action adventure book of a young woman who's trying to find her place in the world and specifically understand how she should think about relationships and the people that she's surrounding herself with. But the way she does it is this wide sweeping, amazing journey that she takes from starting in Reno, Nevada, to riding motorcycles in the salt flats of Utah, making her way to New York and getting involved in the 1970s art scene in New York City, living in poverty, trying to make her way there, getting involved with this Italian artist, and then going to Italy and having these adventures in this villa, crazy adventure with political anarchists and kidnapping everything. This book has so much in it, and I loved the main character's willingness to just jump in and try something, and I related so much. I'm also in my youth, I was also someone to just jump in and test my mettle, and this book reminded me of who I was at that time and what I was seeking and looking for, and where I was willing to go to find out where my boundaries were. Great book, loved it. So for me, that was number 7. Number 5 also continues my apparent love of adventure and the idea of how journeys transform you. This is a backlist, very far backlist. This was published in the 1920s and was revived by AK Press. This is Jack Black's You Can't Win. This is a hobo tale, autobiographical, story of one man's life. And he was raised brought up in the Depression era and rode the trains and deeply embedded with hobo life, and gets himself in all sorts of scrapes and shenanigans, gets himself in trouble in all sorts of places. It's hilarious, funny, heartwarming, and gives you really a fantastic idea of class in America before our middle class really took off. So it's a really great look at America at a specific time. It's one of the books that I recommend the most when people say, tell me something obscure, and this would be it. I think it's fantastic. Then as I think about the lower part of the books that I love, one of the things that I do seek out in books, and is rare if I can find it, it's tenderness and softness, and but written in a way that's not schmaltzy and sentimental, but still full of heart and insight. And I think that you might not do better than Our Souls at Night by Ken Haruf. This book, so beautiful, is the story of a widow, older widow, who knocks on the door of one of her neighbors that she knows as an acquaintance. He is a widower, and she has a proposal for him. She's incredibly lonely, and she acknowledges that and says that the hardest thing for her is climbing into bed at night and being alone in a bed in those morning hours. And so she asks him if he would be willing to have an arrangement where they sleep together and truly sleep, so that they're not in those dark hours of the morning alone, and they can talk to each other. And this is about loneliness. It's about aging. It's about our society, which leans to youth and this youth fascination. And what do you do when you're no longer viable market material? And how do you quell that loneliness in different ways? And this is, as I said, achingly beautiful. Love it very much. So that was 5. Now we get to the book that I love that I will never probably reread. I think I could say that pretty well. It's A Little Life by Hanya Yanigahara. Let me try to sum up my feelings about this book very succinctly, because I could talk about this for a long time. This book changed me in my life, not as a reader, but how I see the world now. This book looks at friendship. It looks at our responsibilities to each other. It looks at why we expect people to suffer to just stay around, and the burden that puts on people when we force them to deal with it and suck it up. It talks about secrets and how we can love people very, very deeply and still never know, for many reasons, some of the deep places and dark places that exist in them. And that's probably fine. There are things that maybe we shouldn't know about other people. I think there's definitely things we shouldn't know about other people. And it's also probably the best illustration of the phenomenon of the hunter-prey relationship, where as a young person, when you've been abused or bad things have happened to you, it marks you in a very specific way that people who are hunters can recognize and exploit. And therefore, throughout someone's life, they are at risk for repeated trauma and repeated abuse. That I know I'm telling you a lot about the book. There's been a lot of discussions about this book. This is a book that I cannot recommend, though it means so much to me. I feel that this book you have to find it on your own, and you have to be in the right mind space to take this on, because there is so much sadness and depths of misery and violence in this book. But on the flip side, there is so much heart. There is so much compassion. There is the depths of feeling that exists in this book is tremendous. And the friendships and the characters are lovely. I love these characters deeply. This is a triggering book. It's very difficult to read. I won't do it again, but I used to be the type of person that believed that a friend will do anything with you and help you solve anything, and you're in it together. And I recognized the naivete of that type of thinking, and that the autonomy, that people get to make their own choices, and it's important that we honor individuals' options and choices. We can love them We can be there for them. We can try to support them, but everyone has their own life to live. And that's A Little Life. That came in for me as number 4. The number 3 is also a book that I've given out that I need to get another copy for. That is, for me, it was hauntingly beautiful. An Unnecessary Woman by Rabih Alamedine. Now, this book is set in the Middle East. I think it's set in Syria. And beautiful story of this woman who is self-made. She is a translator. She's surrounding herself with books. She's surrounding herself with literature. She thinks about books. She thinks she makes allusions to literature throughout the book. She lives a solitary life, but purposefully. She had a difficult marriage. She lives alone and finds herself in precarious circumstances with her housing. And it makes her have to reach into and determine, how is she going to survive on her own, or does she actually need community? Should she reach out and try to build some bonds there with her community? It's a beautiful, beautiful story, thoughtfully told. So many references. If you're a book reader that likes to take notes of books that you hear in books, this will keep you delighted to no end. I thought the characters were tremendous, and there's something that gets uncovered in this book that just tore at my heart and made me feel so much. And I love characters, especially women, that live life on their own terms for themselves. They're not outward looking, they're internally committed to their own journey at even if there are costs at that. And she is one of them. So that was number 3. Number 2, speaking of independent journeys and your own trail and doing it yourself, number 2 for me is Patti Smith's Just Kids. This is a love story to New York City in the late 60s and 70s. This is also a love story between Patti Smith and her partner, Robert Mapplethorpe. It's a story of her leaving home and moving to the city and becoming an artist, and everything that meant, the poverty, the fear, the self-doubt. And Patti Smith is such a unique writer. Her writing is beautiful. I was intimidated to read this because I'm still intimidated by poetry, and I know that she's primarily a poet. So I stayed away from this for a while. I'm glad I finally picked it up because it's very readable, but beautiful, absolutely beautiful. She tells great stories of trying to work in a bookstore. And so she's just a great, inspiring writer. The characters in her are fantastic. You meet so many luminaries from the world of fiction and music and art that travel through here. So it's just it's a great book. And then my favorite book of all, if you've watched any of this, I think I've mentioned in at least half of my updates. It's 84 Charing Crossroad by Helene Hanff. This is nonfiction, just like Just Kids was nonfiction, and also You Can't Win and Hope in the Dark. So surprising amount of nonfiction. This book, as I've mentioned before, this is an epistolary book, story of a woman who is a screenplay writer, who lives on her own in New York City. This is right after World War II. She is self-made, self-educated, but she keeps looking for New York City bookshops for these specific British books that she cannot find, and she's incredibly frustrated. She sees an ad and sends a letter asking them to look for certain books for her. And what I love about this book is the relationships that get created, and it's also the there's so much about the British culture and American New York City culture. She's a ballsy broad in a lot of ways, and just kind of will march right in there and say things that had me gasping with laughter, and she's like, oh God, how's that going to be received? And then the British come back with the stiff upper lip and the controlled professionalism, and then but she just chips away, and she ends up having a relationship not just with the main person she corresponds with, but with the entire book staff. It's delightful, lovely story. I read it every first of the year, my first read of every year, because there's so much in here that I love and that reminds me of the life that I want to live, which is surrounded by books, dreaming of places to travel to, and it also reminds me to not put off the things that I want to do, to live life when you can. There's a lot of heart and a lot of warmth and great lessons in this book. So that is my top 10 for today. Hope that there's something in here that you have liked, or something that you have never heard about, or if you don't like any of these at all, I would love to hear any of that in the comments below. Thanks for your time. Bye.